Born 1,000 years ago, a child memorized entire books before most could read. A mind so sharp, scholars feared him. This boy would one day rewrite the rules of medicine and science. From curing kings to mastering astronomy, philosophy, and healing, he united the knowledge of worlds. Every step he took pushed human understanding beyond its limits. His ideas saved lives, shaped nations, and built the foundations of modern science. This is the story of a mind centuries ahead of its time. Watch the full episode and witness the genius of Avicenna.
Imagine a world brimming with culture, science, and poetry. A place where knowledge was treasured like gold and scholars were revered like kings. This was the world that welcomed one of history's greatest minds. Our story begins in the year 980 in the quiet village of Avicenna, nestled near the magnificent city of Bukhara, the heart of the Samanid Empire. It was here, in this golden age of learning, that a legend was born, Ibn Sina, known to the West as Avicenna. His father, Abdullah, was an educated and respected official in the Samanid government, a man of sharp intellect and disciplined habits. His mother, Setara, was a beacon of wisdom and kindness, her gentle nature known throughout their community. From the very beginning, they saw something extraordinary in their son. It wasn't just the typical innocence of a newborn. It was a profound calmness, an insatiable curiosity, a spark in his eyes that seemed to peer into the very fabric of the world. He was different, and they knew it. Their home was a library, a sanctuary of knowledge. Books lined the walls, filled with the wisdom of ancient Greece, India, and Persia. Travelers and scholars were frequent guests, their conversations painting vivid pictures of distant lands and revolutionary ideas. They spoke of astronomy, of the stars that map the heavens, of mathematics, the language of the universe, and of medicine, the art of healing. Young Avicenna, with wide, attentive eyes, would sit quietly, listening to every word, his mind absorbing information like a sponge. He wasn't just hearing. He was understanding, connecting dots that others couldn't even see. While other children played games, Avicenna played with ideas. His questions were not the simple whys of a typical child. Instead, he would ponder the universe's grandest mysteries. How do the celestial bodies move across the sky without falling? He would ask, what is the soul and where does it reside? How does a tiny dormant seed possess the blueprint to become a towering tree? What unseen forces cause a healthy person to fall ill? His questions were startling in their depth and complexity, revealing a mind that was already grappling with the fundamental principles of philosophy, biology, and physics. His father, Abdullah, would often just smile, a look of awe and pride on his face. He recognized the rare gift his son possessed. He wasn't just raising a boy. He was nurturing a genius. He provided Avicenna with the best tutors, ensuring that this burning flame of curiosity was fueled with the finest knowledge available. At an age when most children were just learning to read, Avicenna was already delving into the Quran, memorizing its verses and studying its interpretations. By the age of 10, he had mastered it completely. But his intellectual appetite was boundless. He soon moved on to study logic, metaphysics, and the natural sciences. He devoured the works of Aristotle, Euclid, and Ptolemy, not merely reading them, but debating them, challenging them, and building upon their foundations. He saw the world not as a series of random events, but as a complex, interconnected system governed by laws and principles that could be understood through reason and observation. This was more than just a gifted child learning his lessons well. This was the dawn of a new era in human thought. The quiet boy from the small village of Avicenna was on a path to redefine medicine, philosophy, and science for centuries to come. His early years weren't just a prelude to his great achievements. They were the very foundation upon which his intellectual empire was built. The seeds of curiosity planted in his childhood home, nurtured by his wise parents and the vibrant culture of his time, were about to blossom, changing the world forever. This was the birth of Avicenna, the Prince of Physicians, a mind that would illuminate the path of knowledge for 1,000 years. He was a prodigy, a genius whose intellectual journey began almost as soon as he could walk and talk. This is the story of the young Avicenna. Imagine a world over 1,000 years ago, long before the internet, before public libraries were on every corner. In this world, knowledge was a precious commodity, sought after by scholars who dedicated their entire lives to its pursuit. And into this world, a boy was born who would master it all before he was even a teenager. By the tender age of 5, while other children were just learning to piece together simple sentences, Avicenna was already reading fluently. Think about that for a moment. At an age when most of us are grappling with picture books, he was consuming texts. But it didn't stop there. Reading wasn't just a skill, it was a gateway. By age 6, he wasn't just reading, he was writing. And not just scrawling letters, but writing with a grace and elegance that would put many adults to shame. His hand moved with the same confidence and precision as his mind. It was as if the very act of communicating complex ideas was woven into his DNA. Then came age 7. At this point, his mind was like a sponge, but a sponge of infinite capacity. He could hear poems and stories just once and commit them to memory instantly. Every verse, every character, every plot twist was stored away, perfectly indexed in his rapidly expanding mental library. For young Avicenna, nothing was confusing. Nothing was frightening. And most remarkably, nothing was boring. The world was an endless puzzle, and he was born with the ability to see how all the pieces fit together. The truly astonishing milestone came when he turned 10. By this age, he had memorized the entire Quran. Now many have accomplished this feat of memory throughout history, but Avicenna didn't just memorize the words. He absorbed them. He understood their deepest meanings, their intricate logic, and the countless layers of interpretation that had been debated by scholars for centuries. He wasn't just reciting, he was comprehending. He delved into religious ideas, ethical questions, and philosophical debates that even seasoned adults found bewildering. His father, recognizing the extraordinary gift his son possessed, made their home a hub of intellectual activity. He invited the greatest scholars of the time to their house. The air buzzed with conversations that spanned the known world of knowledge. They discussed the profound insights of Greek philosophy, charting the heavens with Persian astronomy, unraveling the elegant proofs of Indian mathematics, and exploring the healing arts of Arab medicine. They debated the very nature of reality through logic and metaphysics. And in the corner, a small boy sat, listening. At first, little Avicenna was silent, his eyes wide, absorbing every word, every concept, every argument. But it wasn't long before his silence was broken. He began to ask questions. Not the simple questions of a child, but questions that were so insightful, so penetrating, that they stopped the great scholars in their tracks. His queries cut to the heart of the matter, revealing paradoxes they hadn't considered and connections they had missed. The scholars would look at each other, their expressions a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. Whispers would fill the room. "Who is this child?" one would ask. "How can he possibly understand these things?" Another would murmur, "Is this even possible?" They all wondered. They were witnessing something that defied explanation, a mind so luminous it seemed to belong to another realm. But the truth, in its own way, was simple. Avicenna was a natural genius. He was born with a relentless curiosity and an intellect that knew no bounds. He wasn't just learning. He was fulfilling his very purpose. For him, the pursuit of knowledge wasn't a chore or a duty. It was his playground, his passion, his destiny. And this was only the beginning of a life that would change the course of science, medicine, and philosophy forever. Picture this: Bukhara, a bustling city on the Silk Road. Around the year 990, A young boy, not even a teenager yet, is about to embark on an intellectual journey that will leave everyone, including his own teachers, in complete awe. As Avicenna entered his early teens, something inside him ignited. It wasn't just a desire to learn. It was an unstoppable, all-consuming hunger for knowledge. He started with the basics, or what he considered the basics: arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, logic. But the way he learned was anything but basic. He wasn't just memorizing formulas or theories. He was devouring them, digesting them, and understanding them on a level that nobody had ever witnessed before. Imagine a student who not only finishes the textbook in a week, but also finds new ways to apply every single concept. That was Avicenna. He was a sponge, but a sponge that could also analyze and question the very water it absorbed. This relentless pace of learning was astonishing. He learned faster than anyone had ever seen. But what truly set him apart was his sheer tenacity. What do you do when you hit a problem you can't solve? Maybe you ask for help, or maybe you set it aside for a while. Not Avicenna. If something didn't make sense to him, it became his sole obsession. He would ponder it all day long. As the sun set and the city of Bukhara fell quiet, his mind would just be getting started, turning the problem over and over all through the night. This wasn't just about raw brain power. It was a deeply spiritual and mental quest for him. He had a unique method for breaking through these intellectual walls. He would pray. Not for the answer to be given to him, but for the clarity to find it himself. He sought guidance, asking for the fog in his mind to lift. He would go for long walks alone, using the quiet rhythm of his footsteps to focus his thoughts, to strip away all distractions until only the problem remained. He would repeat the questions in his mind like a mantra, again and again, approaching it from every conceivable angle. Years later, when he wrote about his life, he described this process vividly. He wrote, "When a problem confused me, I would repeat the prayer and ask for understanding. Then suddenly, the meaning would shine in my mind. It was like a lightning flash of insight, a moment of pure, unadulterated clarity where the complex puzzle pieces would just click into place. It was a fusion of faith, discipline, and pure intellectual horsepower. This ability to wrestle with a problem until it submitted was the secret to his genius. By the time he was just 14 years old, something remarkable had happened. Avicenna had officially surpassed every single one of his teachers in the great city of Bukhara. Think about that for a moment. At an age when most of us are just trying to navigate high school, he had exhausted the knowledge of the wisest scholars in a major center of learning. There was literally nothing more they could teach him. The dynamic flipped completely. The student became the master. Instead of attending lessons, he began giving them. His former teachers were now his students, listening intently as this 14-year-old boy explained complex philosophical and scientific concepts they had struggled with for years. His father, who had watched this incredible journey with a mix of pride and astonishment, finally realized the undeniable truth. Bukhara, this vibrant intellectual hub, was no longer big enough for his son's mind. Avicenna's intellect was like a mighty river that had outgrown its banks and was destined to flow out and change the landscape of the entire world. The young prodigy of Bukhara was ready for a much, much bigger stage. His journey was only just beginning. Imagine being just 16 years old and stumbling upon the one thing that would make your name echo through eternity. For a young man named Avicenna, that thing was medicine. Now think about your high school classes. Remember how some subjects just clicked while others felt like trying to solve a puzzle in the dark. For Avicenna, medicine was the one that clicked instantly. He even wrote later in life, "Medicine is simple. It's not difficult like mathematics or metaphysics." Can you believe that? While his peers were struggling with the basics, he was already light years ahead. He devoured everything he could find about the human body. He studied diseases, their symptoms, and the treatments known at the time. Anatomy, pharmacology, you name it, he mastered it. His sources of knowledge were vast. He learned from ancient books, from wise scholars, from the intricate patterns of nature, and most importantly, by carefully observing the sick. He spent countless hours at bedsides, watching, listening, and learning directly from the human body itself. But Avicenna wasn't just a sponge, soaking up existing knowledge. He was a revolutionary thinker. He introduced a concept that was completely radical for his time, something no medical school was teaching. He pioneered the idea of the mind-body connection. Think about that for a moment. Over 1,000 years ago, he realized that our emotions have a direct and powerful impact on our physical health. He observed how stress could make people sick, how fear could literally make the heart race and change a person's pulse, and how profound sadness could weaken the entire body, making it vulnerable to illness. This was groundbreaking. He was practicing psychosomatic medicine centuries before it even had a name. By the time he turned 18, Avicenna wasn't just a student anymore. He was a full-fledged physician, and his reputation began to spread like wildfire. People would travel for weeks, sometimes months, from distant lands, all seeking the help of this young prodigy. He had a gift. He could cure illnesses that had stumped doctors twice his age, with decades more experience. It was said that he could look at the human body and understand its inner workings, as if he were reading a detailed map. His diagnoses were astonishingly precise. He could pinpoint the root cause of a sickness with an accuracy that seemed almost supernatural to his contemporaries. He wasn't just treating symptoms. He was healing people. He was restoring families and giving hope where there was none. His clinic was always full, a testament to his incredible skill and compassionate care. He was a rising star, a beacon of knowledge in a world that often felt dark and uncertain. But as his fame grew, so did the whispers about his extraordinary talent. Little did he know, his skills were about to be put to the ultimate test. A test that would come not from a common patient, but from the highest seat of power. Fate was weaving a new dramatic chapter for Avicenna. In the opulent palaces of Bukhara, the powerful king, the sovereign of the land, was about to fall gravely ill. The royal physicians, the best in the kingdom, would be baffled. Desperation would soon grip the court. And in this moment of crisis, a single name would be whispered in the halls of power: Avicenna. His life, his career, and the very course of medical history were about to change forever. The stage was set for a confrontation that would elevate him from a brilliant physician to a legendary figure. What happens when the boy genius meets the dying king? The story is just getting started. Ever wondered what happens when you give a genius the keys to the greatest library in the world? Well, for a young man named Avicenna, it changed everything. His story isn't just about reading books. It's about becoming a master of all human knowledge. After miraculously saving the life of the ruler of Bukhara, Avicenna was offered a reward beyond his wildest dreams. Not gold, not jewels, but something infinitely more precious: unlimited access to the royal library. Now, this wasn't just any library. It was a legendary treasure house, a place where the collective wisdom of civilizations was gathered. Imagine books from Persia, Greece, Rome, India, and the entire Arab world, all under one roof. Texts that had been lost everywhere else survived here, waiting to be rediscovered. For Avicenna, stepping into this library was like an explorer discovering a new continent. He walked through aisles stacked high with scrolls and volumes, a universe of knowledge at his fingertips. There was medicine, astronomy, mathematics, logic, and the deep mysteries of metaphysics. He didn't just skim through them. No, Avicenna read everything, completely and thoroughly. He didn't just read words. He absorbed ideas, digested theories, and engaged with every single debate held within those pages. He devoured knowledge with an insatiable hunger. He later wrote about this time with a sense of awe, saying, "It seemed that no knowledge in existence was hidden from me." This wasn't arrogance. It was a simple statement of fact from a mind operating on a different level. His days were spent in the library, and his nights were spent reading by the faint glow of an oil lamp. often until the last drop of oil was gone and the flame flickered out. But what did he do when he encountered something he didn't understand? He didn't just give up. He would read the passage again and again. If the meaning still eluded him, he would pause, put the book down, and just think. He would ponder the problem from every angle, turning it over and over in his mind. He even prayed for clarity, seeking guidance from a higher power. And then, as if by magic, the answer would arrive. He described it as a sudden burst of light, a moment of pure, brilliant insight where the complex became simple. This intense period of study and reflection wasn't just a hobby. It was the forging of a legend. In the crucible of the Royal Library, Avicenna transformed himself from a gifted young doctor into something truly extraordinary. A man who, by the age of 21, arguably knew everything that was known to the world at that time. He became a true polymath, a living encyclopedia. As you can imagine, a man like that doesn't stay a secret for long. Word of his incredible intellect spread like wildfire. His fame grew, but with it came new responsibilities that pulled him away from his quiet world of books. Visitors started arriving from distant lands, making long journeys just to meet him. Eager students flocked to Bukhara, begging him for lessons. Established doctors sought his advice on their most difficult cases. And scholars, the sharpest minds of the era, came looking for a worthy opponent for debate. Avicenna's life was changing. He was no longer just Avicenna the healer. He was becoming a philosopher, a scientist, and a master teacher. He was the center of an intellectual gravity that was pulling everyone towards him. He was at the peak of his influence, a shining star in the academic world. But history is never a straight line. Just when he thought he had his life figured out, his journey was about to take a dramatic and unexpected turn, sending him down a path he could never have anticipated. A storm was gathering on the horizon, one that would test his knowledge, his resilience, and his very will to survive. While the young Avicenna was reaching new heights of intellectual and medical brilliance, the world around him was beginning to crumble. The mighty Samanid Empire, the very foundation of his opportunities, was facing its own terminal illness. From the north and east, enemies were closing in on Bukhara, the jewel of the empire. The government, once a symbol of stability and patronage, was growing weaker by the day. Insurrections from within and invasions from without shook the city to its core. The inevitable finally happened. The Samanid Empire collapsed, and with it, Avicenna's entire world. Suddenly, the protection he enjoyed, the generous support he received, vanished. The Royal Library, his personal universe of knowledge, was now inaccessible. The city he called home was no longer safe. His promising career in the bustling heart of Bukhara was over, just like that. Faced with this grim reality, Avicenna made a decision that was as difficult as it was necessary. He had to leave. He was just a young man, but the path ahead was clear. He packed what he could, his precious books, his notebooks filled with observations and ideas, and a few personal belongings. With a heavy heart, he said goodbye to Bukhara and set out on a long, uncertain journey across the lands of Persia. This journey would not just be a change of scenery. It would fundamentally change the man he was and the legacy he would leave. His life became one of constant movement, a testament to his resilience. He traveled from one city to another, a wandering scholar in a fractured world. First to Urgench, then to Nishapur, Merv, Tus, and Ray. In each new place, his reputation as a brilliant physician preceded him. He didn't just seek refuge. He served. He offered his medical skills to anyone who needed them, healing the sick, from the poorest commoner to the wealthiest ruler. He became a teacher, gathering eager students around him, sharing the knowledge he had so painstakingly acquired. And whenever he found a library, no matter how small, he would lose himself in its scrolls, continuing his relentless pursuit of wisdom. But stability was a luxury he could no longer afford. Danger was his constant companion. The political landscape was a chaotic chessboard of ambitious warlords fighting for scraps of power. Governors switched allegiances overnight. Cities that offered sanctuary one day could become death traps the next. The turmoil of the era was inescapable. At one point, in the city of Gurgen, a paranoid ruler grew suspicious of Avicenna's influence. Accused of disloyalty, he had to flee under the cover of darkness, escaping arrest by mere hours. His life fell into a grueling, repetitive cycle. Find a new city, study its knowledge, heal its people, teach its youth. And then, when the political winds inevitably shifted, escape to the next town. Study, heal, teach, escape, repeat. It was a life that would have broken most people. The constant uncertainty, the lack of a home, the ever-present threat of violence, it was a heavy burden to bear. Yet, through all this chaos, Avicenna's mind remained his unshakable fortress. It stayed sharp, focused, and incredibly productive. In fact, the challenges seemed to fuel his genius. He continued to write, pouring his thoughts onto paper in dusty inns and temporary lodgings. He refined his philosophical ideas, challenged existing medical doctrines, and made new discoveries. He was not just surviving. He was actively advancing the frontiers of human knowledge while on the run. This period of wandering, though fraught with peril, forged him into a more practical, more experienced, and more worldly scholar. He wasn't just a theorist anymore. He was a battlefield-tested physician, a leader of thought who had seen the best and worst of humanity. Every city was a new classroom, every patient a new lesson. And as he moved on from the ruins of one opportunity to the promise of another, his next destination would present him with his greatest challenges yet, but also his most significant triumphs. The journey was far from over. After years of restless wandering, a fugitive scholar finally found a safe haven. This is the story of Avicenna, a name that would echo through the halls of medicine for 1,000 years, and his time in a city called Gorgan, near the vast Caspian Sea. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the constant threat of political turmoil faded into the background. Imagine the relief he must have felt, a man who had been a vizier, a prisoner, and a fugitive, now welcomed with open arms. The ruler of Gorgan wasn't just offering a place to hide. He was offering a home. Avicenna was given a comfortable residence and prestigious positions as both a court physician and a teacher. This stability was the missing ingredient he needed. The chaos of his past had forged his intellect, but the peace of Gorgan would allow him to channel it like never before. With a secure roof over his head and a supportive patron, Avicenna could finally focus on his life's true passion, organizing the entirety of human knowledge. It was in this peaceful city that he began his most monumental task. He took out his pen and started writing a book that would become the cornerstone of medical education for centuries in both the Islamic world and Europe. He called it Al-Canon fi al-Tib, or as we know it, the Canon of Medicine. This wasn't just another medical text. It was an audacious attempt to create a single logical system for all of medicine. Think about that for a second. One man trying to catalog and structure everything known about the human body. He divided his masterpiece into clear, distinct sections. He covered anatomy, explaining the structure of the body. He detailed physiology, the way the body functions. He created systematic approaches to diagnosis and treatment. His work included an entire section on pharmacy, creating a massive list of medicinal plants and compounds. He even delved into surgery and incredibly disease prevention. He was a man far ahead of his time. What's truly mind-blowing are the specific concepts he introduced. He described methods for clinical trials to test the effectiveness of drugs. He wrote detailed analyses of pulse diagnosis, linking the rhythm of the heart to specific ailments. He made keen observations on the connection between the mind and the body, essentially pioneering the field of psychosomatic medicine and mental health. He even discussed how our environment, things like water quality and air, affects our well-being. These were revolutionary ideas, centuries before they would be independently discovered in the West. The Canon wasn't just a book. It was a complete medical library in a single volume. News of the brilliant teacher in Gorgon spread like wildfire. Students from all across Persia and beyond undertook long, arduous journeys just to have the chance to study under him. His days were filled with teaching, his evenings with writing, and his nights with tireless research. He was a whirlwind of intellectual energy, and medicine was just one part of his genius. During this same period, he began writing another encyclopedic work, this one even broader in scope. He called it Kitab al-Shifa, the Book of Healing. But this wasn't about healing the body. It was about healing the soul and mind through knowledge. It was a massive encyclopedia covering everything from logic and metaphysics to physics, astronomy, and music. In Gorgon, Avicenna transformed from a brilliant physician into a master author, a synthesizer of knowledge whose words were destined to outlive the very empires that had hunted him. He had found his sanctuary, a place where his genius could finally flourish without restraint. But as was the pattern of his life, peace was a fleeting luxury. The political stability of the region began to crumble. New conflicts erupted, and the shadow of danger once again fell over his life. The safe haven of Gorgon could no longer protect him. Avicenna, the master of medicine and philosophy, had to pack his books, say goodbye to his students, and step back onto the road. After wandering through deserts and mountains, Avicenna finally arrived in Hamadan, a city brimming with power and ruled by the mighty Buyid dynasty. It was a place of opportunity, but also of great danger. The ruler of Hamadan, an emir named Shams al-Dawla, was gravely ill. He suffered from a severe colic that contorted his body in pain, and a deep melancholy that clouded his mind. The best physicians in the land had been summoned, but their remedies were useless. The emir's condition worsened day by day, and the court fell into a state of despair. News of a brilliant traveling physician reached the palace, a man named Ibn Sina, or as we know him, Avicenna. With his reputation preceding him, he was granted an audience with the ailing ruler. Avicenna, calm and confident, stepped into the royal chamber. He observed the emir, felt his pulse, and asked probing questions about his diet, his habits, and his state of mind. He didn't just see a collection of symptoms, he saw the whole person. With remarkable insight, he diagnosed the complex interplay of physical and psychological ailments afflicting Shams al-Dawla. He prescribed a custom blend of herbal medicines to soothe the colic and calm the digestive system. But his treatment went further. He understood the connection between mind and body, a concept far ahead of his time. He engaged the emir in philosophical discussions, stimulating his intellect and lifting his spirits from the depths of depression. Slowly but surely, the treatment worked. The pain subsided. The color returned to the emir's face. The melancholy lifted. Avicenna had not just treated the illness. He had restored the man. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Shams al-Dawla saw in Avicenna not just a healer, but a mind of extraordinary caliber. He wanted this genius by his side, not just as a physician, but as an advisor. And so, in a move that stunned the entire court, he appointed Avicenna as his vizier, the highest political office in the empire, second only to the ruler himself. Imagine that. The scholar, the doctor, the philosopher who had spent his life buried in books and medical texts was now a statesman, a prime minister. Avicenna embraced the new role with the same intellectual rigor he applied to everything else. During the day, he was the vizier of Hamadan. He managed the state's finances, oversaw the military, navigated complex diplomatic treaties, and offered counsel on matters of war and peace. He brought order to the administration and justice to the people. But when night fell, his work was far from over. He would return to his study, where students and scholars gathered eagerly. Under the flicker of oil lamps, he would dive back into his true passions, dictating chapters of his medical encyclopedia, the Canon of Medicine, and his philosophical masterpiece, the Book of Healing. He was living two lives, balancing the world of power politics with the world of profound thought, a feat that seemed almost superhuman. But brilliance breeds jealousy, and power attracts enemies. In the shadowy corridors of the palace, whispers began to circulate. Other court officials, men who had spent their lives climbing the political ladder, were enraged. They saw Avicenna as an outsider, an upstart who had stolen the position they coveted. His intellect was a threat, his influence an insult. They couldn't challenge him on merit, so they resorted to slander and conspiracy. They twisted his words, questioned his loyalty, and planted seeds of doubt in the minds of the military leaders. They accused him of arrogance, of disrespecting the army, and even of plotting treachery against the very ruler he had saved. The political climate grew tense. The army, stirred up by these malicious rumors, became mutinous. They demanded Avicenna's head. They stormed his house, looting his possessions and calling for his execution. Shams al-Dawla, caught between his loyalty to Avicenna and the threat of a full-blown military coup, was forced to make a terrible choice. He stripped Avicenna of his title as vizier and banished him from the court. To save his life, Avicenna went into hiding, concealed by a trusted friend. The man who had been the most powerful figure in the empire was now a fugitive, his life hanging by a thread. But the story doesn't end there. Fate had another twist in store. A few months later, the emir's illness returned with a vengeance. The court physicians were once again helpless. In his agony, Shams al-Dawla realized his mistake. There was only one man who could save him. He sent out his agents, not to arrest Avicenna, but to beg for his return. Avicenna was found and brought back to the palace. He once again treated the ruler and, with his unparalleled skill, cured him for a second time. Ashamed and grateful, Shams al-Dawla reinstated him as vizier, restoring all his titles and powers. Avicenna was back on top, his position seemingly more secure than ever. But the conspiracies hadn't vanished. His enemies were merely lying in wait, their hatred simmering beneath the surface. For a time, he managed the empire and continued his scholarly work, but he knew the peace was fragile. The court of Hamadan was a viper's nest, and Avicenna was about to face the darkest and most perilous chapter of his life, a challenge that would test his spirit to its very core. As Avicenna served as the Grand Vizier of Hamadan, his influence didn't just grow, it exploded. And with that explosion came the scorching heat of jealousy from other officials. Imagine this. You're a seasoned politician, a hardened general who spent a lifetime playing the game of power. Then, this scholar, this philosopher, this doctor, this man of books and ideas walks in and suddenly holds more authority than you could ever dream of. It was a bitter pill for many to swallow. The whispers started subtly, slithering through the opulent palace halls like venomous snakes. Avicenna is too powerful. He's dangerous. He's plotting something. These weren't just rumors. They were carefully crafted weapons, lies designed to poison the mind of the ruler, and the ruler himself was an easy target. Already suffering from unstable health and a mind clouded by paranoia, he was fertile ground for the seeds of doubt. Every day, the conspirators watered those seeds, nurturing his fear, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that moment came. A political crisis erupted, shaking the foundations of the kingdom. It was the perfect storm. Avicenna's enemies seized their chance, converging on the ruler, their voices a chorus of fabricated concern. Avicenna is disloyal, they insisted. He's using this crisis to seize power for himself. The constant pressure, the relentless accusations finally broke the ruler's fragile trust. In an instant, the world turned upside down for the greatest mind of his time. The great scholar, the man who had healed kings and counseled rulers, was arrested. He was dragged from the heights of the palace to the depths of despair, thrown into a dark, cold prison cell beneath the formidable fortress of Hamadan. The hands that once held a scalpel with surgical precision were now bound in heavy iron chains. The man who once commanded armies of words now sat in silence. His books, his lifelines to the world of knowledge, were taken away. His medical tools, the instruments of healing, were removed. His most precious possession, his freedom, was stolen. But you cannot imprison a mind like Avicenna's. Even in the crushing darkness of that cell, his intellect burned like a supernova. He found ways to defy his captors. He wrote secretly on scraps of paper, anything he could get his hands on, smuggling his thoughts out into the world. When he had no paper, he would recite his vast philosophical works from memory, the words echoing off the cold stone walls, a testament to the power of the human spirit. He didn't just survive, he thrived. He became a teacher to the other prisoners, sharing his knowledge with the forgotten and the condemned. He became a doctor once more, healing the sick and injured who shared his grim fate. He later wrote a line that should be etched into the memory of history. "My body was confined, but my intellect remained free." Avicenna's imprisonment transcended his personal tragedy. It became one of the most powerful symbols of his entire life, an enduring, powerful reminder that no matter how strong the chains or how thick the walls, true knowledge can never be contained. It is a force of nature, unstoppable and eternal. But even as he proved the resilience of his mind, fate was far from finished with him. More challenges, more trials were waiting just around the corner. Avicenna's story in that prison is not just about survival. It's about the victory of the human intellect over physical confinement. He proved that even when stripped of everything, the one thing that can never be taken away is the power of your own mind. Picture this, a dark, cold prison cell in Hamadan. Inside, one of the greatest minds in history, Avicenna, is trapped. For months, he's been a political prisoner, his future uncertain, his genius stifled by stone walls. It seemed like his story might end right there, a forgotten footnote in the annals of time. But then, destiny intervened in the most dramatic way possible. The ruler of Hamadan, the very man who had imprisoned him, died suddenly. In an instant, the entire political landscape of the city was thrown into chaos. Power, once held so tightly, now scattered like dust in the wind. The conspirators who had plotted against Avicenna saw their influence crumble overnight. It was a stunning reversal of fortune. For Avicenna's supporters, this was the moment they had been waiting for. With the old guard losing control, his allies seized the opportunity. In the confusion and turmoil that engulfed the city, a plan was set in motion. Friends, loyal and brave, orchestrated a daring escape. Under the cover of darkness, they spirited him out of the prison that had been his world for so long. But freedom was not yet guaranteed. The city was still crawling with soldiers and officials loyal to the old regime. Being recognized would mean certain recapture, or worse. Avicenna, the celebrated physician and philosopher, had to disappear. He had to become someone else. So he shed his identity as a scholar and adopted the guise of a humble wanderer. He wrapped himself in the simple, coarse robes of a Sufi mystic, a traveling holy man. A cloth hid his famous face from prying eyes, and his only possession was a wooden walking stick. Think about that for a second. This was Avicenna, the great mind of the Islamic Golden Age, the author of the Canon of Medicine, a book that would be the cornerstone of medical education for centuries. This was the brilliant philosopher who had debated kings and advised viziers. And now he was walking through the dead of night, disguised as a simple traveler, his every step a risk. He slipped out of Hamadan without a sound, melting into the shadows. His destination was the city of Isfahan, a beacon of culture and learning, ruled by a patron known for his love of scholars. It was a long and perilous journey, but it was his only hope for a new beginning. As he traveled, walking under the vast starry sky, Avicenna had plenty of time to think. He wasn't just walking away from a prison. He was walking through the very essence of human experience. He reflected on the transient nature of power, how empires could rise and fall in the blink of an eye. He thought about the people he had known, the loyalty of his friends, the betrayal of his enemies. He saw firsthand how fragile power was, how quickly a ruler's death could upend an entire kingdom. But amidst all this change and uncertainty, he recognized one thing that endured: knowledge. He would later write, "The world changes. Knowledge remains. The crowns of kings would tarnish, and their castles would turn to ruin. But the ideas, the discoveries, the wisdom captured in books, that was permanent. That was the real legacy." His escape from Hamadan was more than just a flight to safety. It was a profound journey of self-discovery, a trial that forged his philosophical views. It marked the end of one chapter of his life and the beginning of another, one where he would reach even greater heights of intellectual achievement in the welcoming city of Isfahan. What makes it genius? Is it just a high IQ? Or is it something more, something unstoppable? Let's talk about a man who redefined the meaning of the word. His name was Avicenna, and his life was anything but peaceful. Picture this. You're one of the most brilliant minds of your time. You're a physician, a philosopher, an astronomer. Kings and emirs seek your counsel. You cure a powerful ruler of a mysterious illness, and as a reward, you're granted access to his legendary royal library. You spend days and nights there, devouring knowledge, consuming every scroll and manuscript you can get your hands on. You're at the peak of your career, celebrated and respected. Then, everything changes. The ruler dies. His kingdom falls into chaos. Suddenly, you're not a celebrated scholar anymore. You're associated with the old regime. The new rulers see you as a threat, so you have to run. You escape the city in the dead of night, leaving behind the comfort of the court, the prestige, and that magnificent library. Your life becomes a blur of movement, of hiding, of constantly looking over your shoulder. This was the rhythm of Avicenna's life. It was a constant cycle of rising to the highest peaks of society, only to be thrown into the deepest valleys of uncertainty. He found a new patron, a new city, and his reputation would precede him. He'd be appointed as a court physician, his wisdom recognized. Soon, his political and administrative talents would shine through, and he'd be made a vizier, a prime minister. He'd be advising rulers, managing state affairs, and somehow, in the middle of all this, he'd still find time to write. He wrote some of his most famous works like the Canon of Medicine, not in a quiet, isolated study, but in the bustling, politically charged atmosphere of a royal court. Imagine trying to write a medical encyclopedia that would be used for centuries, while also navigating treacherous court intrigue. But just as he would settle in, political winds would shift again. An opposing faction would gain power, a military defeat would make his patron vulnerable, and suddenly, Avicenna would be a target. Once again, he'd become a fugitive. He'd go into hiding, finding refuge in the small house of an apothecary, in a dusty basement, anywhere he could be safe. But did he stop working? Never. While hiding from those who wanted him captured or worse, he would be editing his manuscripts by candlelight. He carried his library not in chests of books, but inside his own mind. His intellect was his most portable and valuable possession. One of the most incredible stories about him happened during one of these tumultuous periods. A political rebellion erupted, and Avicenna, due to his connections with the ruling power, was arrested. He was thrown into a fortress, a political prisoner. In that cold, dark cell, most people would despair. They would see only walls, only confinement. Avicenna saw an opportunity. He asked his jailers for ink and paper. He needed to write, to get the thoughts swirling in his head down on the page. They refused. They wanted to break his spirit, to silence his mind, but they underestimated him. If they wouldn't give him paper, he'd use the walls. If they wouldn't give him ink, he'd find something else. He got his hands on pieces of charcoal from a fire, and he began to write. He wrote on the walls of his prison cell. He drafted complex philosophical arguments, outlined chapters for new books, and refined his existing theories. Even in chains, his mind refused to be imprisoned. It roamed free, exploring the cosmos, the human body, and the nature of existence. By the time he was finally released, he hadn't just survived his imprisonment. He had been productive. The ideas he had scrawled on those walls with charcoal would later become parts of new books, works that are still studied in universities today, over 1,000 years later. This is the essence of Avicenna. He wasn't just a scholar who happened to live in a turbulent time. He was a force of nature. He was a moving library, a traveling university. He carried the entire Islamic golden age of science and philosophy within him. His life teaches us that genius isn't just about intellect, it's about resilience. It is about an unquenchable thirst for knowledge that no prison can contain and no political turmoil can extinguish. It's the will to create, to learn, and to share, no matter the circumstances. That is true, unstoppable genius. Imagine a life so packed with genius, it feels like 100 lifetimes rolled into one. That was the life of Avicenna, a name that echoes through the halls of medicine, philosophy, and science, even 1,000 years after his death. But how did this incredible journey end? It's a story of relentless passion, a story that tells us everything about the man behind the legend. By the year 1037, Avicenna was a titan of the intellectual world. He had spent decades on the run from political turmoil, constantly fleeing from one city to another. Yet in the midst of this chaos, he never stopped. He taught countless students, healed the sick, and wrote books that would shape the future of human knowledge. But this whirlwind of activity came at a price. The years of stress, the sleepless nights spent writing by candlelight, and the constant travel began to wear him down. His body, once strong and resilient, started to fail him. Anyone else would have stopped. Anyone else would have sought a quiet place to rest and recover. But Avicenna wasn't just anyone. The thought of a life without purpose was far more terrifying to him than the thought of death itself. So when he felt his end approaching, he did the unthinkable. He pushed himself even harder. He joined a military caravan, once again on the move, but his mission remained the same. During the day, he rode alongside soldiers, but his focus was on treating the wounded and the sick. His medical knowledge was as sharp as ever, his compassion unwavering. And when the sun set and the campfires were lit, his day was far from over. He would gather his students, and under the vast starry sky, he would continue to teach. The air would buzz with debates on philosophy, the mysteries of the universe, and the nature of existence. He was a man possessed by a thirst for knowledge, a man who refused to let a single moment go to waste. He was writing, thinking, and arguing right up until his final days. One day, completely exhausted, he collapsed. As his students gathered around him, filled with concern, he whispered the words that would come to define his entire life. He said, "I prefer a short life with meaning to a long life without purpose." It was his personal creed, the philosophy that had driven him across deserts and through war zones, the belief that had fueled his incredible output of work. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of not living fully. At the age of 57, a relatively young age even for that era, Avicenna died on the road. It was a poignant end. He passed away far from the grand libraries and bustling universities he so loved, far from the comfort of a settled home. But he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by the people who mattered most to him, his adoring students. They were his true legacy, the living vessels of his knowledge, ready to carry his teachings forward. And carry them forward they did. After his death, his influence didn't fade, it exploded. His books, especially the Canon of Medicine, spread like wildfire across Asia, Africa, and Europe. They were translated into Latin and became the standard medical textbooks in European universities for over 600 years. Doctors from Paris to Baghdad studied his words, learning his techniques for diagnosis, his herbal remedies, and his surgical procedures. His philosophical ideas were just as powerful. He reconciled the logic of Aristotle with Islamic theology, creating a framework that would influence generations of thinkers in both the East and the West. His ideas on the soul, on metaphysics, and on the nature of God were debated and studied for centuries. His name, Ibn Sina in his native Persian, became Avicenna in the West, and it became synonymous with wisdom and intellectual brilliance. His name became immortal. So who was Avicenna? To call him just a physician is to miss the point. To call him just a philosopher or a scientist is to see only a fraction of the whole picture. He was all of these things and more. He was a polymath, a true Renaissance man centuries before the Renaissance even began. He was the bridge. He stood with one foot in the ancient world, drawing on the wisdom of the Greeks, and the other foot firmly planted in the future, laying the groundwork for the modern world. His life reminds us that true impact isn't measured in years, but in purpose. 1,000 years have passed since he whispered his final words on that dusty road. Yet, every time a doctor consults a medical text, every time a philosopher ponders the nature of being, every time a scientist seeks to understand the world, they are, in some small way, walking in his footsteps. We are all still walking across the bridge that Avicenna built. Imagine a man so brilliant that kings would risk their kingdoms for his advice. A man whose mind was so powerful, he could write entire books without a single drop of ink. This is the story of Avicenna, a philosopher and physician whose genius nearly cost him his life. In the bustling cities of ancient Persia, Avicenna's name was spoken with awe. He wasn't just a doctor. He was a miracle worker. His reputation soared, reaching the ears of the powerful emir of Hamadan, Shams al-Dawla. The emir, plagued by a mysterious illness that baffled every other physician, summoned Avicenna to his court. Under Avicenna's care, the emir made a swift and complete recovery. Overjoyed and deeply impressed, the emir didn't just reward Avicenna with gold. He gave him something far more valuable and dangerous, his trust. Avicenna was appointed as the royal physician, but his role quickly expanded. He became the emir's closest confidant, his most trusted advisor. Late at night, while the city slept, the emir would summon Avicenna, not just for medical advice, but for counsel on matters of state, military strategy, and courtly politics. Avicenna's influence became legendary. He wasn't just healing the emir's body. He was shaping the future of the entire kingdom. But with great power comes great jealousy. In the gilded halls of the palace, whispers turned into conspiracies. Other ministers and commanders, their own ambitions thwarted by Avicenna's rise, began to plot against him. "He's a sorcerer," they hissed. "He has bewitched the emir. He is not just curing him. He is controlling him." The court became a viper's nest of intrigue. The political climate grew tense, and the seeds of rebellion were sown. Unpopular decisions made by the emir were skillfully blamed on Avicenna. He was the perfect scapegoat, a brilliant foreigner with unprecedented power. The resentment boiled over until the city of Hamadan erupted in chaos. A military rebellion broke out, and the soldiers had one primary target: Avicenna. They accused him of treason, a charge completely without evidence, fabricated solely because his intellect threatened the old guard. One morning, just as the sun began to paint the sky, the terrifying sound of splintering wood shattered the peace of Avicenna's home. Soldiers stormed in, a whirlwind of destruction. They were not there to arrest him. They were there to erase him. They tore through his library, a treasure trove of knowledge collected over a lifetime. His precious manuscripts, filled with groundbreaking medical discoveries and profound philosophical insights, were ripped to shreds. His notes, his life's work, were scattered to the wind like common dust. They dragged the philosopher-physician from his home, parading him through the streets before throwing him into the cold, dark depths of a fortress prison. The man who had healed kings and enlightened minds was now locked away in a windowless cell, alone and stripped of everything he owned. His enemies believed they had silenced him, that they had broken the great Avicenna. They were wrong. For in that suffocating darkness, something incredible happened. Prison did not break Avicenna's spirit. It sharpened his mind. Deprived of paper, ink, and books, he turned inward to the one place his captors could not reach, his own intellect. He had a library within him, a universe of ideas. Night after night, in the pitch-black silence, he began to compose a new philosophical masterpiece entirely in his head. He constructed complex arguments, structured entire chapters, and memorized them word for word. Every evening, he would recite his mental manuscript to himself. Every morning, he would edit and refine it, sharpening his logic, polishing his prose, pushing the boundaries of human thought. He was building a cathedral of ideas in the prison of his mind. Months later, when the political tides turned and he finally managed to escape, Avicenna emerged not as a broken man, but as a creator reborn. He immediately set to work, transcribing the book he had carried in his memory. The result was one of the most important philosophical works in history, Kitab al-Shifa, or the Book of Salvation. It was a testament not just to his genius, but to the unstoppable power of the human mind to find light in the deepest darkness. Avicenna proved that you can imprison a person, but you can never imprison an idea. Have you ever felt like you're just one opportunity away from unleashing your true potential? Imagine being on the run, a famous scholar and physician, forced to flee for your life. This was the reality for Avicenna, the great Persian polymath. After a series of political upheavals, he had to escape the city of Hamadan, not as a celebrated genius, but disguised as a simple Sufi traveler. Picture him, just a man with a dusty robe, a worn turban, and a quiet, observant gaze. But this was no ordinary traveler. Every step he took was filled with purpose. He journeyed through harsh deserts and over treacherous mountains, his destination a beacon of hope, the city of Isfahan. At that time, Isfahan was ruled by the powerful and enlightened prince, Ala al-Dawla. News of a mysterious learned traveler reached the prince's court, and whispers suggested it might be the legendary Ibn Sina. When the prince finally confirmed Avicenna's arrival, he didn't send a messenger or a guard. He rushed to meet him in person. Imagine the scene. The powerful ruler standing before the dusty traveler, asking with a mix of awe and disbelief, "Are you truly Ibn Sina, the healer of kings?" Avicenna, ever humble, simply smiled and replied, "I am only a seeker of truth." This meeting was a turning point. Ala al-Dawla wasn't like the previous rulers who had imprisoned Avicenna out of fear and jealousy. Instead, he saw the brilliant mind before him and recognized its immense value. He immediately appointed Avicenna as his vizier, his personal physician, and the chief scholar of his entire court. For the first time in what must have felt like an eternity, Avicenna found not just safety, but genuine respect and intellectual freedom. He had found peace. And in that peaceful, supportive environment, he became an unstoppable force of creation. Think about what it takes to be truly prolific. For Avicenna, this was his golden age. Freed from political turmoil and the constant threat of danger, his mind was finally able to soar. He adopted an incredible routine, writing an average of 5 pages every single day, without fail. His days were a symphony of scholarship. He would delve into philosophy at dawn, wrestling with the biggest questions of existence. At noon, he would turn his attention to medicine, advancing the science of healing. And as night fell, he would compose poetry, weaving beauty with words. He wasn't just working. He was living and breathing knowledge. During his time in Isfahan, he completed some of his most monumental works. He finished the Book of Healing, a colossal philosophical and scientific encyclopedia that's not just about medicine, but covers everything from logic to metaphysics. He wrote the Book of Salvation, a concise summary of his philosophy. He even penned the Eastern Philosophy, a work that hinted at a more mystical, esoteric dimension to his thought. On top of all this, he produced advanced treatises on logic, psychology, physics, and astronomy. He wasn't just a star in the intellectual sky. He became the sun of the Persian world, radiating ideas in every direction, illuminating the path for generations to come. His court in Isfahan became a legendary center of learning. Scholars, students, and thinkers from all over flocked to the city, drawn by his magnetic intellect. They would gather for nightly sessions where Avicenna would lecture, debate, and discuss everything under the sun. Music would play, food would be shared, and minds would be ignited. It was a true renaissance, all centered around one man who had been given the freedom to be himself. This period shows us something profound. The right environment can be the difference between a hidden gem and a radiant sun. It is a testament to what a human mind can achieve when it is nurtured instead of suppressed. But as with all golden ages in history, this one was destined to have an end. The stability of the region was fragile, and the winds of war were beginning to stir on the horizon. The peace that Avicenna had worked so hard to find, the peace that had allowed him to flourish, was under threat. The intellectual sun of the Persian world was about to face its sunset, and a new, challenging chapter of his life was about to begin. But the legacy of what he accomplished in Isfahan was already sealed. The books were written, the ideas were spread, and the light he had ignited could never truly be extinguished. Picture this: Persia plunged into chaos. It's the later years of the legendary scholar Avicenna, and the world around him is on fire. Turkic armies, hungry for power and plunder, are marching towards the grand city of Isfahan. Their goal? To seize its immense wealth, and just as importantly, to capture its brilliant minds, including the greatest of them all, Avicenna. Amidst this turmoil, a crisis erupts that has nothing to do with swords and shields. Avicenna, ever loyal, is accompanying the ruling prince on a critical military campaign. They are on the move, the fate of the kingdom resting on their shoulders. But then, disaster strikes. The prince collapses, struck down by a terrifying and mysterious illness. His body is racked with an uncontrollable raging fever. He's overcome with weakness, unable to even sit up. Violent bouts of vomiting leave him drained and delirious. Panic ripples through the army's high command. The generals, men who face enemy armies without flinching, are now terrified by an invisible enemy. The entire military campaign grinds to a halt. The army is stranded, a sitting duck, and the future of a nation hangs by a thread. In this moment of utter desperation, all eyes turn to one man. Avicenna, the philosopher, the physician, steps forward. While others see chaos, he sees a problem to be solved. He immediately takes charge of the prince's care. He becomes a one-man medical unit in the middle of a war camp. He meticulously prepares complex medicines from his travel kit, personally oversees every bite of food and every drop of water the prince consumes, and even directs the soldiers to adjust the tent's ventilation to control the temperature and humidity. He is a whirlwind of focused energy, treating the prince not just day by day, but hour by hour, minute by minute. His rivals and enemies within the court, who had always been jealous of his influence, see this as their chance. They start whispering, mocking him behind his back. "Look at the philosopher," they sneer. "He's playing doctor, thinking his books can fight off death itself." The whispers are meant to undermine him, to make him doubt himself. But Avicenna doesn't even notice. His focus is absolute. He doesn't have time for their petty games. A life is on the line. He doesn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. He is a constant presence at the prince's bedside, a guardian against the encroaching darkness. His hands are a blur of motion, grinding herbs into potent powders, mixing bitter concoctions, carefully measuring doses. He uses cool cloths to battle the relentless fever, constantly wiping the prince's brow. He coaxes and sometimes even forces the semi-conscious prince to swallow the foul-tasting medicines, knowing that each drop is a step away from the grave. The tent becomes a sanctuary of science and dedication amidst the noise and fear of the military camp. And then on the 3rd night, a change. The air in the tent, thick with tension, suddenly feels lighter. The prince's violent shivering subsides. The raging heat that had consumed his body begins to recede. Avicenna places a hand on his forehead. The fever has broken. Slowly, as if rising from a deep, dark ocean, the prince's eyelids flutter open. His gaze, though weak, is clear. He looks at Avicenna, his voice a barely audible whisper. "You saved me." Avicenna, exhausted but serene, simply bows his head in humility. He replies, his voice calm and steady, "Truth and care saved you, Your Highness. I only followed their path." The news spreads like wildfire through the camp. "The prince is alive. He will recover." The despair that had gripped the army transforms into an explosion of joyous celebration. Soldiers cheer, generals breathe sighs of relief, and the very air seems to hum with renewed hope. In that moment, it wasn't a general or a king who had saved them, but a scholar with his knowledge and unwavering dedication. Even with an enemy army on the horizon and traitors in his own camp, Avicenna's genius, his commitment to healing and truth, proved to be the most powerful weapon of all. For centuries, one name echoed through the halls of medicine, philosophy, and science, a name synonymous with genius, Avicenna. But the story of how his light nearly went out, and how he burned even brighter in his final days, is one of a man racing against time itself. Years of relentless work had taken their toll. The constant stress, the endless travel with royal courts, the sleepless nights spent wrestling with the universe's greatest questions, it all began to chip away at his body. Avicenna, the man who had written the Canon of Medicine, found himself battling a severe, chronic stomach illness. He was the greatest physician of his age, yet even he couldn't find a permanent cure for himself. Any other person would have slowed down, retreated into a quiet life of recovery. But Avicenna was not any other person. Faced with his own fragility, he did the unthinkable. He accelerated. He pushed himself harder than ever before. It was as if he could feel the sand slipping through the hourglass, and he was determined to leave nothing unsaid, nothing undiscovered. He wrote faster, his pen flying across pages, trying to capture every last thought. He taught longer, his voice filling lecture halls, eager to pass his wisdom to the next generation. He debated with more intensity, his mind sharper than ever, challenging the established norms and pushing the boundaries of human understanding. He knew his time was running out, and he refused to waste a single second. One evening, while traveling with the prince's court, a wave of unbearable pain washed over him. In that moment of agony, his physician's mind knew the truth. The illness had become fatal. His students, who revered him as a master and loved him as a father, gathered around him, their faces etched with worry. They pleaded with him, "Master, please, you must rest. Stop working. Conserve your strength." Avicenna looked at their concerned faces and offered a serene, knowing smile. He replied with a line that would echo through history. The soul was given wings, and it must use them before the cage breaks. His body was the cage, but his mind, his soul, was a force that could not be contained. He understood that his purpose was not to preserve the vessel, but to let the spirit soar until the very end. In his final days, he prepared for his departure not with fear, but with grace and purpose. He spent his time reciting verses from the Quran, finding peace in his faith. He then turned his attention to his worldly affairs, giving away all his money to the poor and freeing every one of his servants, ensuring their well-being after he was gone. On his final day, at the age of just 57, Avicenna died peacefully. When word of his passing spread, a wave of grief swept across the Persian Empire and beyond. Cities mourned the loss of their brightest star. His students wept for the master they had lost. Kings held grand ceremonies in his honor. Scholars and poets wrote moving elegies, trying to capture the magnitude of the man and his mind. But Avicenna's true legacy wasn't found in the sadness of his death. It was in the unstoppable explosion of knowledge he left in his wake. Think about it. 450 books on subjects ranging from medicine and philosophy to astronomy and mathematics. He didn't just contribute to these fields. He fundamentally transformed them. Hospitals across the globe were organized and run based on the principles he laid out. Medical schools for the next millennium were built upon the foundations of his teachings. His work became the standard medical text in Europe for over 600 years. Avicenna didn't just live a life. He forged a legacy. He didn't just exist in his time. He reached across the centuries and shaped the next 1,000 years of human progress. His story is a powerful reminder that our time is finite, but the impact we can have is limitless. It's a testament to the idea that a life dedicated to knowledge, to sharing, and to pushing humanity forward can achieve a kind of immortality. Avicenna's cage may have broken, but his soul, through his work, is still flying. When the great philosopher and physician Avicenna died, the story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. It's a story of how one person's knowledge can echo through centuries, shaping the very world we live in today. After his passing, a frenzy began. It wasn't for gold or land, but for something far more valuable, his writings. From the bustling cities of Persia and Baghdad, to the scholarly halls of Cairo and Damascus, even stretching to the Byzantine Empire, scholars scrambled to get their hands on his works. They weren't just collecting books. They were gathering the most advanced medical knowledge of their time. And at the heart of it all was one monumental work, the Canon of Medicine. This wasn't just another book. It spread like wildfire, igniting a revolution in healthcare. In the grand libraries of Baghdad and Cordoba, you could almost hear the quiet scratching of quills. Students, their fingers stained with ink, sat for hours, meticulously copying every word, every diagram of the canon by hand. This was their key to understanding the human body. Hospitals in Persia didn't just add the canon to their libraries. They completely reorganized their wards and treatment protocols based on Avicenna's methods. Imagine entire medical systems being rebuilt around the ideas of one man. In the vibrant intellectual circles of Cairo, physicians would gather under the stars, debating his theories late into the night. His words were alive, sparking discussion and driving medical science forward. But the most incredible part of the story, the real plot twist, came from a place Avicenna had never been, Europe. Decades after his death, a monumental translation project began. When the Canon of Medicine was finally rendered into Latin, it didn't just arrive in Europe. It exploded onto the scene like a lightning bolt, electrifying the entire continent's intellectual landscape. The timing was perfect. Europe was just emerging from the Dark Ages, hungry for knowledge, and Avicenna's canon was the feast they had been waiting for. The newly established universities, the future powerhouses of Western thought, were the first to embrace it. In Bologna, Padua, Paris, and Oxford, the canon wasn't just recommended reading. It became the core medical textbook. It was the foundation upon which European medicine would be built. Think about that for a moment. Every aspiring physician in Europe, the very people who would go on to become the founders of modern Western medicine, learned their craft from Avicenna's book. They studied his detailed anatomy, his classification of diseases, his pharmaceutical recipes, and his principles of clinical trials. The funny thing is, his influence was so immense, so foundational, that his own identity began to merge with his work. Many European students and doctors didn't even know his real name, Ibn Sina. To them, he was known by a simpler, more powerful title, the Prince of Physicians, or even more simply, the Master. When you said the Master, everyone knew who you were talking about. This wasn't a passing trend. For over 700 years, from the 12th century all the way to the 18th, no doctor in Europe could receive their degree without mastering the teachings of the canon. 700 years. That makes it the longest used and most influential medical textbook in the entire history of humanity. So while Avicenna the man may have passed away, his ideas did not. They were copied, translated, debated, and taught. They crossed borders, cultures, and religions. They healed the sick and educated generations of doctors. In the end, Avicenna achieved something few ever do. Through his work, through his relentless pursuit of knowledge, he became immortal. His legacy isn't just in history books. It's in the very DNA of the medicine we rely on today. You probably know Avicenna as one of the greatest doctors in history, a medical giant whose books were used for centuries. But what if I told you his greatest legacy wasn't in medicine at all? What if I told you he was the secret architect behind the biggest philosophical revolution the world has ever seen? This is the story of how one man's mind reshaped our reality. While Avicenna's medical encyclopedia was saving lives across the Islamic world, his philosophical works were quietly igniting a fire that would spread across continents. When these texts, filled with revolutionary ideas, first reached medieval Europe, they were like a lightning strike. Scholars were absolutely astounded. They had never encountered anything like it. Here was logic, explained with breathtaking clarity. Here was psychology, defined with scientific precision. And here was metaphysics, written with a boldness that challenged everything they thought they knew. Imagine being a scholar in the 12th century, poring over ancient texts by candlelight. Suddenly, you get your hands on a translation of Avicenna. It's not just an argument, it's a complete system of thought. He wasn't just rehashing Aristotle. He was expanding on him, correcting him, and building a new intellectual universe. His work on the soul, for instance, wasn't just spiritual speculation. He presented a detailed map of the mind, distinguishing between different faculties like perception, imagination, memory, and reason. It was the world's first comprehensive cognitive psychology, 1,000 years ahead of its time. His famous floating man thought experiment is a perfect example of his genius. He asks you to imagine a person created in mid-air, blindfolded, with limbs separated so they can't touch anything. This person has no sensory experience whatsoever. The question is, would this person know that they exist? Avicenna's answer was a resounding yes. They would be aware of their own consciousness, their own self, proving that the soul or the mind is a substance independent of the body. This idea was so powerful that it echoed centuries later in the work of René Descartes and his famous line, "I think, therefore I am." Avicenna laid the groundwork for one of the most fundamental concepts in Western philosophy. And there was one man in particular who felt the full force of Avicenna's intellect, Thomas Aquinas. If you know anything about Western philosophy or Christian theology, you know Aquinas is a titan. He's the figure who synthesized Christian faith with Aristotelian reason, shaping the very foundations of Western thought for the next 800 years. And who was his intellectual sparring partner? The one he constantly engaged with? Avicenna. Aquinas' writings are filled with references to him. He debated Avicenna, he expanded upon his ideas, and he built his own monumental system on the framework Avicenna provided. He didn't always agree with him, but the respect was immense. Aquinas quoted Avicenna hundreds of times, giving him the honorific title, the distinguished philosopher. Think about that. To one of the greatest Western thinkers, Avicenna wasn't just some foreign scholar. He was the philosopher to be reckoned with. This wasn't a footnote in history. It was a central dialogue that shaped the intellectual destiny of Europe. The influence didn't stop with Aquinas. Avicenna's ideas became the stepping stones for the future. They trickled down through the centuries, fueling the Renaissance, sharpening the tools of scientific reasoning, and laying the groundwork for the Enlightenment. The concepts he introduced were so far ahead of his time that they feel modern even today. He was pioneering early theories of the mind, cognitive science, and formal logic. His belief that the mind possessed both rational and imaginative powers foreshadowed the entire field of modern psychology, from Freud to cognitive behavioral therapy. His metaphysical frameworks are still studied and used by philosophers grappling with questions of existence and reality. So when we talk about the great minds who built our world, Plato, Aristotle, Newton, Einstein, we have to include Avicenna. He wasn't just a participant in history. He was one of its chief architects. His work is a testament to the fact that ideas have no borders, and that a single brilliant mind can illuminate the path for all of humanity, across cultures and across centuries. He wasn't just writing books. He was building the very foundations of the modern world. Have you ever heard of a man who wrote nearly 500 books? A philosopher, a physician, a poet, and an astronomer, whose wisdom shaped civilizations. His name was Avicenna, a true giant of the Islamic Golden Age. But here's the tragedy. A huge part of his incredible legacy has vanished, lost to the unforgiving march of time. Imagine this. Avicenna diligently wrote over 450 major works, pouring his soul and intellect onto countless pages. Today, we have fewer than 250 of them. So what happened to the rest? Where did centuries of genius disappear? The story of this loss is a dramatic saga of collapsing empires and cultural destruction. As the centuries rolled on, the world Avicenna knew crumbled. In the 13th century, the great city of Baghdad, a beacon of learning, was ransacked by Mongol invaders. The legendary House of Wisdom, along with countless other libraries, was burned to the ground. Imagine entire shelves of Avicenna's original manuscripts, his medical observations, his philosophical debates, turning to ash and smoke, lost forever in the chaos. The knowledge of generations gone in an instant. It wasn't just in Baghdad. Across Persia, Avicenna's homeland, relentless wars and political instability forced scholars to become guardians of a fragile heritage. They would hide precious manuscripts, tucking pages into secret underground vaults, hoping to protect them from invading armies and looters. Some were successful, but many of these hidden treasures were never recovered. They remain buried, silent witnesses to a forgotten time, Gigic locations lost with the people who hid them, and the destruction spread westward. In Andalusia, modern-day Spain, a flourishing center of science and philosophy faced its own turmoil. Political struggles and a shift in power led to the deliberate wiping out of scientific collections that were deemed heretical or dangerous. Libraries were purged, and Avicenna's works, which had been studied padros, were cast aside or destroyed. It was a systematic erasure of knowledge, a closing of the mind that cost us dearly. Each lost book was like a star extinguished from the sky of human intellect. But this story isn't just one of loss. It's also a story of incredible, almost miraculous survival and rediscovery. It's a real-life treasure hunt that continues to this very day. Think about the thrill of it. Just when we think all is lost, a piece of Avicenna's mind reappears. Not long ago, a forgotten copy of his monumental medical encyclopedia, the Canon of Medicine, was discovered tucked away in a bustling Iranian bazaar, a priceless artifact hiding in plain sight. This wasn't just a book. It was the foundation education for centuries. And there's more. In a private library in Turkey, a scholar stumbled upon a philosophical treatise Aventos thought to be lost. Its pages berisy deep reflections on metaphysics and the nature of the soul. It was like hearing Avicenna's voice speak directly to us across 1,000 years. In the archives of Andalusia, fragments of his astronomical notes were found, preserved by sheer luck, giving us a glimpse into his understanding of the cosmos. Each discovery is a puzzle piece, helping us reconstruct the full picture of this extraordinary thinker. The search is far from over. Historians and scholars are like detectives, following clues in ancient texts and oral traditions. Some of the most dedicated researchers believe that a complete, unknown manuscript is still out there, waiting to be found. Legend has it that Avicenna wrote one of his most profound books while he was unjustly imprisoned. This text, a culmination of his life's philosophy, is rumored to be hidden somewhere in the Middle East. If this book, this prison manuscript, were ever to be found, it could revolutionize our understanding of his philosophy. It might contain ideas so advanced, so different from his known works, that it would force us to rewrite history. The mystery of Avicenna's lost library is a powerful reminder that our past is not set in stone. There are still secrets buried, conoscenza waiting to be unearthed. It's been 1,000 years since a man named Avicenna walked the earth, a whole millennium. But if you look closely, you'll see his fingerprints are absolutely everywhere. Think about it. Every time a doctor makes a diagnosis, trying to pinpoint exactly what's wrong. Every single time a medical student pulls an all-nighter, poring over anatomy textbooks. Every time a pharmacist carefully measures out a dose of medicine. Even when a psychologist delves into the complexities of the human mind. In a way, they are all following a path that Avicenna first carved out. This isn't just a small influence. It's foundational. He gave us concepts that we take for granted today. Things like clinical trials, the idea of testing a treatment before using it widely. Evidence-based medicine, making decisions based on facts and results, not just belief. He pioneered incredibly detailed diagnostics, creating a systematic way to understand illness. He was one of the first to explore psychosomatic health, the powerful connection between our minds and our bodies. He laid the very foundations for modern pharmacology and even helped shape our medical ethics. His systems of logic were so profound they were taught in universities for centuries. What he truly did was create a unified structure for scientific knowledge, connecting the dots between different fields. Before Avicenna, so much of medicine was tangled up in superstition and guesswork. He took that chaos and began to forge it into a true science. He did the same for philosophy, shifting it away from pure speculation and grounding it in rigorous logic. He transformed simple curiosity into a structured roadmap for human progress, showing us how to ask questions and systematically find the answers. Avicenna's life story isn't just about one brilliant individual. It's a powerful lesson in how civilization itself moves forward. It's a story powered by courage, guided by reason, and fueled by a relentless, unstoppable pursuit of truth. His life was anything but easy. He lived through wars, was forced into exile, and even faced imprisonment. He had to deal with jealous rivals who wanted to see him fail and navigated treacherous political chaos. But through all of that turmoil, he never, ever stopped learning. He never stopped writing. And he never stopped dreaming of a better, more knowledgeable world. Think about the sheer volume of his work. While on the run or locked in a cell, he was still composing monumental texts that would shape the future. His drive was internal, a fire that no external hardship could extinguish. He showed the world that true change doesn't come from wielding power or accumulating wealth. It comes from the sheer force of intelligence, from the power of a mind dedicated to understanding the universe. Now, 1,000 years later, we are still walking in the light that he lit. Humanity is still benefiting from the intellectual seeds he planted. His legacy isn't carved into cold stone statues or grand monuments. It's a living, breathing thing. You can find it in every hospital where lives are saved using principles he helped establish. It's in every university where knowledge is passed down and built upon. It lives in every science laboratory where researchers push the boundaries of what we know. Most importantly, his legacy lives on in the minds of every single person who seeks knowledge, who asks why, and who dares to believe that we can find the answers. Avicenna's story teaches us that one person's dedication to reason and truth can echo through centuries, changing the world forever. Imagine being the most brilliant mind of your era, a rock star philosopher, a groundbreaking physician, and a trusted advisor to kings. Imagine being the most brilliant mind of your era, a rock star philosopher, a groundbreaking physician, and a trusted advisor to kings. Now imagine doing all of that while your body is slowly failing you in a world torn apart by political chaos. This was the reality for Avicenna in his final breathtaking years. By the time he reached his late 40s, an age that was considered old in the 11th century, Avicenna wasn't just a scholar, he was a legend. But while his mind burned brighter than ever, a lifetime of relentless work and constant turmoil had started to take its toll on his body. Decades of travel, often on the run from rival rulers, countless sleepless nights spent writing by candlelight, the immense stress of wars, political intrigue, unjust imprisonment, and daring escapes it all added up. He was a man who had lived 10 lifetimes in one. His health began to falter. He developed a chronic and severe stomach ailment, what we might today call colic or a serious digestive disorder. His devoted students, who followed him everywhere, saw his daily struggle. They watched him wince in pain, yet refused to stop working. He would teach, write, and debate, all while battling a condition that would have sent most people to bed for weeks. His resilience was almost superhuman. When his students would plead with him to rest, to take care of his health, Avicenna would give them an answer that perfectly captured his spirit. He'd say, "I prefer a short life with wide knowledge over a long life with ignorance." For him, a life without learning was not a life worth living, regardless of its length. Even as his health declined, his workload only seemed to increase. He was still in high demand, serving as a vizier and physician to various rulers in what is now modern-day Iran. He was the go-to person for settling complex political disputes, advising governments on statecraft, and of course, healing the sick. But this was just his day job. In his so-called free time, his intellectual furnace was roaring. He was in one of the most productive phases of his entire life, a whirlwind of creative and scientific energy. He wasn't just writing one book. He was often writing several at the same time, jumping between wildly different subjects with astonishing ease. One day, he might be composing a chapter for a new treatise on philosophy, delving into the nature of the soul and existence. The next, he'd be charting the stars for a work on astronomy, or documenting rock formations for a pioneering text on geology. And all the while, he continued to expand his monumental Encyclopedia of Medicine, the Canon of Medicine, and his philosophical masterpiece, the Book of Healing. It is as if he knew his time was running out, and he was in a race to pour all the knowledge in his head onto the page. His students were in awe, but they were also deeply worried. They saw a man who was literally working himself to death. They begged him, "Master, please slow down. Your body needs rest." But Avicenna, ever the teacher, would look at them and calmly reply, "A day without learning is a day wasted." This wasn't just a clever phrase. It was the core principle of his existence. Every waking moment was an opportunity to learn something new, to write something important, to contribute to the vast ocean of human knowledge. The idea of letting a day pass in idleness was more painful to him than any physical ailment. His final years were spent in the service of Ala al-Dawla, the ruler of Isfahan. This period was one of relative stability, and Avicenna thrived. He established an observatory to study the cosmos and made significant astronomical observations, even correctly noting that Venus is closer to the Earth than the Sun. He was a polymath in the truest sense of the word, a universal genius whose curiosity knew no bounds. He was the Leonardo da Vinci of the Islamic Golden Age, 1,000 years before Leonardo. But the constant campaigning and travel with his patron, the ruler, proved to be too much. During a grueling military expedition, his stomach condition flared up with a vengeance. He tried to treat himself, applying his own vast medical knowledge, but his methods were extreme. It's said that in his desperation to get back to work, he administered a series of harsh enemas, which only worsened his condition and led to an ulcer. Even on his deathbed, his mind remained sharp. He gave away his possessions to the poor, freed his slaves, and spent his last days listening to readings from the Quran. In the year 1037, at the age of 57, the great Avicenna passed away. He was buried in Hamadan, Iran, where his mausoleum stands today as a monument to one of history's greatest thinkers. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy was just beginning. His writings, especially in medicine and philosophy, would travel far beyond the Persian world. Translated into Latin, his works ignited a fire in medieval Europe. The Canon of Medicine became the standard medical textbook in European universities for over 600 years. For centuries, if you were a doctor anywhere from Baghdad to Paris, you were studying Avicenna. His philosophical ideas, a brilliant synthesis of Aristotelian thought and Islamic theology, would deeply influence later thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, shaping the course of Western philosophy. Avicenna's life story is not just a tale of intellectual achievement. It's a testament to the power of human dedication. He was a man who faced war, prison, and chronic illness, yet never wavered in his quest for knowledge. He reminds us that the pursuit of understanding is one of the noblest journeys we can undertake. His famous quote, "A day without learning is a day wasted," is more than just a historical anecdote. It's a timeless challenge to us all. History remembers the giants, the thinkers, the revolutionaries. But what happens when the giant begins to fall? Today, we're not just talking about a historical figure. We're talking about the final defiant chapter in the life of a man who changed the world, Avicenna. Picture this. The year is 1037. The lands of Persia are once again thrown into chaos. War has broken out, a familiar ugly drumbeat in a region of shifting powers. And at the heart of this storm, as always, is the man everyone needs, Avicenna. He's not just a physician. He's a philosopher, a scientist, a trusted advisor. His mind is a weapon, his knowledge a fortress. The ruler he loyally serves, Allah al-Dawla, is marching his army toward Hamadan, and Avicenna is by his side. But this journey, this campaign, would be unlike any other. It would be his last. As the army tramped across the rugged terrain, something inside Avicenna gave way. His body, which had carried him through decades of relentless work, travel, and political turmoil, began to collapse. He was struck by severe colic, a brutal, twisting pain that would have sent any other man to his knees. His stomach felt like it was on fire, and a deep internal inflammation took hold. The attacks came in waves, each one more debilitating than the last. But did Avicenna stop? Did he retreat to a quiet corner and wait for the end? Absolutely not. This was Avicenna. He refused to surrender to his own mortality. From his bedside, which was often just a simple cot in a campaign tent, he continued to command. He was still the chief physician, diagnosing illnesses and prescribing treatments for the soldiers. He was still the sharp military advisor, poring over maps and discussing strategy with the generals. And he was still the devoted teacher, gathering his students around him, his voice weak but his lessons as powerful as ever. The world was demanding his genius, and he was determined to give it, right up until his very last breath. His assistants and students were frantic. They begged him, pleaded with him to rest. "Master, you must conserve your strength," they'd say. "Let us handle this." They tried to take the heavy books and manuscripts from his hands. But Avicenna would just wave them away. He had work to do. His masterpiece, the Book of Healing, a monumental encyclopedia of philosophy and science, wasn't finished. There were chapters to revise, arguments to sharpen, ideas to perfect. He would prop himself up on his pillows, the parchment laid out before him, his hand shaking but his focus unbroken. Imagine the scene. The chaos of a military camp outside, the clang of steel, the shouts of men, the tension of impending battle. And inside this small tent, a flickering lamp illuminates a man whose physical form is wasting away, but whose intellect is burning brighter than ever. One of his students, overwhelmed by the sight, later wrote a line that sends shivers down your spine. His body was crumbling, but the light of his mind filled the entire room. It wasn't just a mind. It was a supernova of thought, refusing to be extinguished by the darkness closing in. This wasn't a man afraid of death. This was a man racing against it, trying to squeeze every last drop of knowledge and wisdom out of his remaining time for the benefit of all humanity. His condition worsened. The colic became unbearable. In a desperate attempt to heal himself, the master physician tried a series of aggressive treatments. He administered his own enemas, sometimes up to 8 in a single day, hoping to flush out the illness that was consuming him. But in his weakened state, these harsh remedies only did more damage, leading to further complications. He knew the end was near, so he made his peace. He gave his possessions to the poor, freed his servants, and spent his final days in quiet contemplation, reciting from the Quran. In June of 1037, in the city of Hamadan, the journey ended. Avicenna, the prince of physicians, passed away. But his story doesn't end there. The man died, but his mind, that brilliant light that filled the room, lived on. His books, like the Canon of Medicine and the Book of Healing, would travel across the world, translated into Latin, shaping the course of medicine and philosophy in Europe for centuries. He built a bridge between the ancient Greek thinkers and the Renaissance. He proved that even in the face of war, political upheaval, and one's own mortality, the pursuit of knowledge is a battle worth fighting to the very end. The life of Avicenna teaches us that our physical limits do not have to define our legacy. It's the fire in our minds, our passion, our unyielding drive to create and contribute that truly makes us immortal. Have you ever wondered what the last words of a genius would be? What final wisdom would one of history's greatest minds leave behind? Let's travel back 1,000 years, to the final days of a man who was more than just a scholar, he was a phenomenon. His name was Avicenna, or Ibn Sina, and his influence echoes through the halls of medicine, philosophy, and science even today. Imagine this. The year is 1037. Avicenna, the intellectual titan of the Islamic Golden Age, feels his life drawing to a close. This isn't a story of weakness or regret. Instead, it's a masterclass in living and dying with purpose. He gathers his closest students, not for a sorrowful farewell, but for one last lecture. They would later call these the final lessons, a series of powerful, concise statements that distilled a lifetime of unparalleled wisdom. One of his first teachings was profound: cure the soul to cure the body. Think about that for a moment. 1,000 years before we started talking about mental health and the mind-body connection, Avicenna was teaching it. He understood that our physical well-being is deeply intertwined with our emotional and spiritual state. He saw patients not as a collection of symptoms, but as whole human beings whose inner world needed as much care as their outer world. This wasn't just a philosophical idea. It was the foundation of his medical practice, a practice that cured kings and commoners alike. Next, he offered a warning that is more relevant today than ever. Knowledge without ethics is corruption. In our age of information overload, where data can be weaponized and technology can be used for both good and ill, Avicenna's words are a powerful reminder. He believed that knowledge carried a profound responsibility. It wasn't enough to be smart. You had to be good. You had to use your intellect to uplift humanity, not to exploit it. He saw that without a moral compass, the greatest minds could become the greatest dangers. This ethical framework was the bedrock of his entire life's work. Then, he shared the secret to his own incredible intellect. Every truth begins as a question. Avicenna was a man driven by insatiable curiosity. He never accepted dogma without questioning it. He looked at the world around him, from the stars in the sky to the workings of the human eye, and he asked why and how. It was this relentless questioning that allowed him to challenge centuries of established medical beliefs, to write the Encyclopedia of Medicine, the Canon of Medicine, which would be a standard medical text in Europe for over 600 years. He taught his students that the journey to truth doesn't start with answers, but with the courage to ask the right questions. As his time grew shorter, his actions spoke as loudly as his words. He didn't waste a moment on apologies or regrets. The only thing he wished for was more time to write the books he still had in his mind, more knowledge to uncover and share. He showed no fear, only a calm acceptance and a final burst of generosity. He distributed his remaining wealth to the poor, ensuring his legacy wasn't just in his books, but in his compassion. He freed his servants, a final act of recognizing the dignity and freedom of every individual. Finally, he asked for solitude. After a life spent in the service of others, teaching, healing, writing, he turned inward. He recited the Quran, the spiritual text that had guided his life, and asked to be left alone with his thoughts. His students were heartbroken. They were witnessing the end of an era. The man who had shaped medicine, philosophy, and science for 3 civilizations, the Islamic, The Jewish and the Christian world was preparing for his final journey. Avicenna's death wasn't a tragic end, but the final powerful chapter of a life lived to the absolute fullest. He left behind a blueprint for a meaningful existence. Heal the soul, act with integrity, question everything, and live with purpose until the very end. His final lessons weren't just for his students. They were for all of us. They teach us that a great life isn't measured by its length, but by its depth, its curiosity, and its contribution to the world. On a hot June day in 1037, a journey came to an end. On the road to Hamadan, a man named Avicenna, aged 57, drew his final breath. For decades, he had wandered the lands of Persia, a traveler in search of knowledge and a safe haven. And so it was fitting, perhaps, that he left this world as he had lived in it, on the road. There was no grand state funeral, no procession of nobles, no official mourning from the courts he once served. He was buried quietly, with only a handful of his loyal students and followers to say goodbye. It was a simple, unassuming end for a man whose life had been anything but. As they laid him to rest, his students wrote a poignant tribute. We thought we were burying a man, but we were burying a universe. And how right they were. While Avicenna's physical journey was over, the journey of his ideas was just beginning. His books, the vessels of his vast intellect, began to travel farther than he ever could. They crossed deserts, mountains, and oceans, carrying his knowledge to every corner of the known world. His most famous work, the Canon of Medicine, became the undisputed medical Bible for the next 700 years. Think about that for a moment. 7 centuries. That's longer than the time between Columbus's voyage and the moon landing. From the newly founded universities of Paris and Bologna to the bustling academies of Spain and the great libraries of Persia, India, and the Ottoman Empire, aspiring doctors learned their craft from his words. The canon wasn't just a collection of facts. It was a systematic, logical approach to medicine. It detailed diseases, diagnoses, and treatments with a clarity that had never been seen before. It introduced concepts like quarantine to prevent the spread of contagious diseases, the importance of clinical drug trials, and a holistic view of patient care that considered both body and mind. He was practicing evidence-based medicine 1,000 years before it became a buzzword. The clinical methods he pioneered became the very foundation of the modern hospital. The idea of dedicated wards for different illnesses, systematic observation of patients, and maintaining detailed medical records, these were all practices he championed. He transformed medicine from a collection of folk remedies and superstitions into a true science. But Avicenna was far more than just a physician. His mind was a sprawling intellectual empire. They called him the Prince of Physicians, but he was also a master philosopher. His philosophical writings were a brilliant synthesis of Aristotelian thought and Islamic theology. When his works were translated into Latin, they landed in Europe like a thunderclap, igniting the minds of scholars like Thomas Aquinas and Albertus Magnus. For centuries, his ideas on metaphysics, on the nature of existence, on the soul, and on the distinction between essence and existence, became central to European scholastic thought. He helped shape the intellectual renaissance of the Western world. His explorations into psychology were astonishingly ahead of their time. He wrote about the influence of emotions on the body, what we'd now call psychosomatic illness. He described conditions like depression, anxiety, and phobias with remarkable insight. He even theorized about a part of the mind that processes information without conscious awareness, an idea that anticipates Freud's concept of the unconscious by nearly 900 years. He understood that the mind and body were not separate entities, but an interconnected system. His influence didn't stop there. His work on logic was studied from Samarkand to Seville. His insights into geology, physics, and astronomy were cited by scholars for generations. Avicenna was a true polymath, a man whose curiosity knew no bounds and whose intellect could grasp the totality of human knowledge of his time. He was a bridge between civilizations, a thinker who belonged not to one culture or one era, but to all of humanity. So when his students said they were burying the universe, they weren't being poetic. They were being precise. They buried a man who had contained within his mind the cosmos of medicine, the galaxies of philosophy, and the stars of countless other sciences. Avicenna the traveler had died, but his mind, his legacy, had become immortal. His ideas are woven into the fabric of our modern world, in the hospitals we trust, the philosophy we study, and the very way we think about the human mind. His body was laid in the Persian soil, but his intellect continues its journey, still traveling, still teaching, still inspiring. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more incredible histories. See you next time.